I am Serena Ashford, and I was 26 years old the day I learned that silence can hurt more than shouting. It wasn't said to my face. No one argued with me. No one told me outright that I didn't matter. They simply didn't show up. And in that absence, everything I believed about family began to fall apart. Before we go any further, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. This channel is a home for people who have carried too much for too long, and your support helps these stories reach hearts that need them. I remember standing outside the auditorium in my navy blue cap and gown, clutching my phone like it might suddenly light up if I believed hard enough. The morning air was warm, the kind of warmth that usually feels celebratory, but my hands were cold and slightly shaking. Families were everywhere, parents hugging their children, siblings taking photos, laughter echoing across the courtyard. I stood apart, pretending to scroll through messages I already knew weren't there. I checked my phone again. Nothing. I told myself not to panic. The ceremony didn't start for another 45 minutes. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe parking was full. Maybe they were running late, but rushing just as hard as everyone else. I told myself every excuse imaginable because the truth felt too heavy to touch. When the doors opened and graduates began filing inside, my chest tightened. I scanned the crowd instinctively, searching for familiar faces. I expected to see my mother, Lenora, sitting near the aisle like she always insisted on doing. I imagined my father, Gideon, standing up too early, clapping too loudly. I pictured my younger sister, Brielle, waving like she was at a concert instead of a graduation. But row after row passed, and their seats remained empty. By the time the ceremony started, I had stopped checking my phone. I couldn't take the disappointment refreshing itself every 30 seconds. When my name was called Bachelor of Science in Nursing, the applause came, but it felt distant, like I was underwater. I walked across that stage with practiced steps, smiling because that's what you're supposed to do, even when your heart feels like it's collapsing inward. I accepted my diploma. I shook hands. I posed for the official photo. And then I walked back to my seat alone. That moment stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because I had earned that day. Every sleepless night. Every double shift. Every skipped meal. Every sacrifice. I had done it. And the people I had done it for didn't even bother to witness it. Later that evening, when the excitement had faded and I was back in my small apartment, my phone finally rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded rushed, distracted, almost inconvenienced by the call. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry we missed it. Your father's prescription ran out, and we had to deal with that. And Brielle had a commitment she couldn't miss. You understand, right?" I didn't understand. But I said, "It's okay." She told me they were proud of me. The words felt thin, like they were said out of obligation rather than meaning. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried silently into my hands, trying not to wake my roommates. That night, something inside me cracked. I didn't recognize it then. I only felt tired. Bone-deep tired. 3 weeks later, my phone rang again. Same number. Completely different tone. "Serena," my mother said brightly, "your sister is getting married." The enthusiasm in her voice startled me. Brielle was 22. She had been dating Noah for less than a year. I congratulated her automatically, still trying to process the sudden shift from my forgotten graduation to this apparent family milestone. "We're planning something beautiful," my mother continued. "Nothing extravagant. Just family and close friends. About $28,000 total." My stomach tightened. I already knew where this was going. "How much are you expecting from me?" I asked quietly. There was a brief pause. We were thinking $6,200. By the end of summer. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my pulse pounding in my ears. You see, this wasn't coming out of nowhere. For 5 years, I had been financially supporting my family. What started as temporary help after my father's health scare had turned into a permanent arrangement that no one questioned. Except me, silently, late at night. I worked 3 jobs before nursing school. I cleaned office buildings at night, worked retail during the day, and waited tables on weekends. My parents struggled financially, but somehow there was always money for new furniture, spontaneous trips, and dinners out. When I was 19, I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 roommates and a mattress on the floor. I was determined to build something better, even if I had to do it alone. During my first year of nursing school, my father had a medical episode. Serious, but not catastrophic. Still, fear took over, and suddenly I became the solution to every problem. I started covering insurance copays, then premiums, then hospital bills, then groceries, then rent when they fell behind. Each request came with gratitude at first, then expectation, then entitlement. Every month, I sent $7,200. Every single month. For 5 years. I told myself it was love. I told myself family helps family. I ignored the growing knot in my chest every time my student loan balance climbed higher. I ignored the fact that I had no savings, no safety net, no room to breathe. So when my mother said, "You're doing so well now. You can handle this," something inside me shifted. I made the mistake of saying, "I'll think about it." The calls started immediately. My mother. My father. Brielle. Extended family members I barely spoke to suddenly had opinions about my responsibility. Everyone reminded me how important family was. How this wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event. How I was the successful one now. My father called me at work, his voice soft and strained. "After everything this family has been through, don't we deserve one beautiful moment?" I stared at the hospital hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and felt anger rise in my chest. I was the one who had been through everything. But instead of saying that, I said, "Let me see what I can do." That night, I ran the numbers obsessively. Extra shifts. Skipped bills. Delayed payments. The math only worked if I accepted that my own stability didn't matter. The breaking point came after a double shift. I came home exhausted, scrub-stained, feet throbbing. My mother and sister were sitting on my porch. They had let themselves in using a spare key I had given them years ago for emergencies. Brielle was holding a tablet, scrolling through wedding dresses. My mother had contracts spread across my coffee table like she was planning a business meeting. "We came to help you plan how you'll contribute," my mother said cheerfully. I felt something snap. "I can't do this tonight," I said calmly. "I just worked 12 hours. I need rest." Brielle's face crumpled. "So you don't care about my wedding?" The manipulation was so obvious it stunned me. My mother sighed and rubbed Brielle's back. "She'll come around." That was the moment I knew something had to change. "Please leave," I said quietly. They stared at me. "Get out of my apartment." They left angry and shocked. I locked the door behind them and slid down against it, shaking. That night, I opened my laptop and calculated everything I had given. 5 years. 60 months. $7,200 per month. Over $430,000. I didn't sleep. And that was only the beginning. The morning after my mother and sister left my apartment, I woke up with a headache that felt like it had roots. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't slow down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's disappointed stare, my sister's tear-streaked face. The contracts spread across my coffee table like evidence of a crime I hadn't agreed to commit. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to fix it. I went to work. I moved through my shift on autopilot, checking vitals, administering medication, offering comfort to strangers who trusted me with their lives. I was good at my job. That part of my life had always been solid. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could advocate fiercely for patients, set boundaries with doctors, and demand respect in professional spaces, yet I folded instantly when my family applied pressure. That realization sat heavy in my chest all day. On my lunch break, instead of calling my mother like I normally would, I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. 5 years of transactions stared back at me in cold black text. Monthly transfers. Medical payments. Insurance premiums. Emergency charges. The pattern was undeniable. Consistent. Relentless. That night, I called Marina, my closest friend from nursing school. She had seen me cry in parking lots, study until dawn, and skip meals because I wasn't hungry, which was code for I can't afford it right now. "Say it again," she said after I told her everything. Out loud. "I've been paying my family's bills for 5 years, I said slowly. And they didn't even come to my graduation. There was silence on the line. Then Marina said, "Serena, that's not love. That's extraction." The word hit me harder than I expected. Extraction. That night, I made a decision that felt terrifying and overdue at the same time. I needed the truth. Not the emotional version my family fed me, but the factual one. The next day, I started making calls. I contacted the hospital billing department, where my father received most of his care. I explained that I was a family member assisting with payments and needed clarity on the charges. Privacy laws limited what they could share, but they confirmed something important. My father did have legitimate medical needs. The condition was real. The care was necessary. That brought me a strange kind of relief. At least they hadn't been lying about that. Then I called his insurance provider. And that's where things started to unravel. His insurance covered nearly 70% of his medical costs. 70%. That meant the remaining balance, while not small, should have been manageable if my parents were contributing anything at all. They weren't. I reached out to an accountant recommended by Marina's cousin. His name was Elliot, and he was kind, methodical, and alarmingly calm when he reviewed my records. When he called me 2 weeks later, his voice was careful. "Serena," he said, "your payments are real. They're going where they're supposed to go. But there's a bigger issue." I braced myself. "What is it?" "Your parents have structured their finances in a way that places the entire burden on you. They're not contributing proportionally. They're not adjusting their lifestyle. They're relying on you completely." The words landed like stones. "They could work more," he continued. "They could negotiate payment plans. Your mother could be employed. But as long as you're covering everything, they don't have to." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. They weren't desperate. They were comfortable. That truth hurt more than I expected. By mid-May, the pressure had escalated. My mother was texting me venue details. Brielle was calling to cry about centerpieces and guest lists. My father asked when I'd be bringing my portion of the wedding money. The invitations had already gone out. I saw mine by accident when a cousin posted a photo online. Serena Ashford plus guest. Not daughter. Not sister. A +1. Something hardened inside me. I called for a family meeting. They were suspicious immediately. "What is this about?" my father asked over the phone. "We need to talk," I said. "All of us. In person." They agreed. We met at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. My mother cooked like she always did when she wanted control. Fried chicken, biscuits, everything designed to make me feel like a child again. Brielle sat scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. I took a deep breath. "I can't keep doing this," I said. My mother frowned. "Doing what?" "Paying for everything. The medical bills. The wedding. Your life." The room went silent. "You make good money," my father said sharply. "You're exaggerating." "I make enough to survive," I replied. "Not enough to support 3 adults indefinitely." Brielle scoffed. "This is about my wedding again?" "Yes," I said. "And my graduation. And 5 years of my life." My mother's voice turned sharp. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I felt my hand stop shaking. "What you did was raise a child," I said calmly. "That's not a debt. That's a responsibility." My father stood up. "So you're saying you won't help your own sister?" "I'm saying I won't destroy myself to make everyone else comfortable." The silence was thick and heavy. "I think you should leave," my mother said finally. I did. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't respond to calls or messages. I needed space to breathe, to sit with the decision I'd made. Marina came over one night with takeout and wine. "They're going to test this boundary," she said gently. "Be ready." She was right. On day 15, my mother called in a panic. My father had been hospitalized again. The old reflex surged, drop everything, rush over, fix it. I paused. "Is he asking for me?" I asked. "Or are you asking for my money?" There was a long silence. That afternoon, I called my bank. I stopped the automatic payments. I sent one final message explaining that I would no longer be financially supporting them. I documented everything. Every dollar. Every transfer. When my mother called screaming minutes later, I stayed calm. "I can't afford this anymore," I said. "I'm drowning." "You're killing your father," she shouted. "No," I replied. "I'm letting him take responsibility for his life." I turned off my phone. The storm had only just begun. The silence after I turned off my phone felt unnatural at first, like standing in a room where the noise has suddenly stopped but your ears are still ringing. I expected panic to swallow me. I expected guilt to tear me apart. I expected to cave within hours. Instead, something else happened. I slept. For the first time in years, I slept without waking up anxious, without replaying imaginary conversations in my head, without calculating money I didn't have. I slept deeply, heavily, like my body had been waiting years for permission to rest. When I turned my phone back on the next evening, the screen exploded with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from numbers I hadn't seen in months. Family members who had never once asked how I was suddenly had a lot to say about who I was. My aunt accused me of abandoning my parents. My uncle said I had let my education go to my head. A cousin wrote, "You think you're better than us now." I read them without responding. What struck me most wasn't the anger. It was the absence of concern. Not a single message asked if I was okay. Not one acknowledged the years I had sacrificed. The narrative had shifted instantly. I was no longer the devoted daughter. I was the villain. And strangely, that clarity was freeing. At work, people noticed the change before I did. A senior nurse pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You seem lighter lately. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I hadn't told anyone at the hospital what was happening, but the difference was visible. I wasn't constantly exhausted anymore. I wasn't snapping under pressure. I wasn't carrying everyone else's crisis on my shoulders. A week later, Brielle's wedding happened. I didn't attend. That decision hurt more than I expected, but it was necessary. I knew if I went, I would be expected to smile through resentment, to pretend nothing had happened, to play the role they wanted me to play. Through a mutual friend, I learned how things unfolded. The final cost came in higher than expected, just over $30,000. My parents had contributed $1,200, less than 5%. The same people who had demanded thousands from me had barely contributed themselves. That alone told me everything I needed to know. But what happened next was unexpected. Midway through the reception, my father had another health episode. Not life-threatening, but serious enough to require medical attention. They left early. The celebration paused. Reality intruded. And for the first time, no one called me. No frantic voicemail. No demand that I rush in and fix it. No expectation that I would absorb the crisis. I found out the next day, not from my parents, but from Brielle. She texted me, "Hey, how are you?" I stared at the message for a long time. I called her. The silence on the line before she spoke told me she was nervous. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." There was a pause. Then she exhaled. "I owe you an apology." I hadn't expected that. "For what?" I asked carefully. "For treating you like a wallet instead of a sister," she said. "For skipping your graduation. For the pressure. All of it." She told me something that stayed with me. She said her husband, Noah, had asked her a simple question during their honeymoon. "Why were you angry that your sister wouldn't pay for your wedding?" he asked, "when she's already paid for your parents' entire lives?" That question had cracked something open in her. "I didn't see it before," she admitted. "But I do now." I cried after we hung up. Not because everything was fixed, but because growth, real growth, had finally happened somewhere in my family. My parents, however, were slower to change. 3 months after I stopped the payments, their medical debt went to collections. For the first time, they were forced to confront the consequences of their choices. My father returned to part-time work. It turned out his condition, while real, wasn't as limiting as it had been framed for years. My mother got a job at a medical office. The irony wasn't lost on me. With employment came insurance benefits. Suddenly, many of the expenses I had been covering evaporated. Necessity had done what guilt never could. They didn't call to apologize. They didn't thank me for the years I had given. Instead, my uncle called on their behalf. "Your mother is very disappointed," he said. "You've made things difficult." "I'm glad they're finding their own way," I replied, and ended the call. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A hospital social worker approached me during a shift. She looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should say anything. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she said, "but I think you should know something." She explained that she had been assigned to a patient whose cardiologist mentioned, almost in passing, that the patient had spoken about his daughter during a visit. He said his daughter had to set boundaries because his family was taking advantage of her, she told me. He said it hurt at first, but he understands now. He said it saved her life. My knees nearly gave out. That was my father. He hadn't said it to me. He didn't know how. But he had finally understood. I went into the staff bathroom and cried. Not out of pain, but release. A year passed. My relationship with my parents is cautious now. We see each other occasionally. Conversations are polite, measured. The old dynamics still try to surface sometimes, but they no longer control me. My father apologized once. Not perfectly. Not poetically. But honestly. "I took advantage of your love," he said. "And I'm sorry." That was enough. Brielle started therapy. She's learning about boundaries. We're rebuilding something real, something healthier. For the first time, I feel like I have a sister, not a dependent. As for me, my life looks different now. I'm 27. I'm still a nurse. But I'm also someone with savings, with plans, with a future that belongs to me. I've paid down a significant portion of my student loans. I've taken my first vacation in years. I've learned what rest feels like. Most importantly, I've learned this. Compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Sacrifice is not noble when it erases you. Family is not a lifetime invoice you're required to pay. If you are listening to this and seeing yourself in my story, if you are drowning quietly while everyone around you stays afloat because of your effort, I want you to hear me clearly. You are allowed to choose yourself. Your boundaries are not betrayal. Your worth is not measured by how much you give away. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this survive because people share them, and somewhere out there, someone needs permission to stop bleeding for people who refuse to stop taking. This is my story, and for the first time, I'm finally at peace.